Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the world of Hollywood comes one of the most popular music biopics of all time, with a legendary pianist who breaks barriers and transcends all genres of music while also fighting against the demons that have haunted him since childhood. We're talking about Ray. Ray is the big-budget film story of iconic pianist Ray Charles. The movie was directed by Tyler Hackford on a screenplay by James White and was released on October 29, 2004 by Universal Pictures. The movie stars Jamie Foxx in the title role. Foxx, who is also an accomplished musician and piano player, spent time with Ray before the film's production in an effort to learn his voice and mannerisms. The film focuses on 30 years in the life of Charles, who lost his sight at the age of 7 shortly after the death of his younger brother George. Both events play a major factor in the film, which follows Ray as he learns the piano and eventually breaks into the music business. But Ray Charles' path to stardom is wrought with individuals that seek to take advantage of his blindness. It's not until Ray pushes back and takes control of his own destiny that his road to the top becomes inevitable. Ray Charles blends traditional gospel songs with modern soul and uses those melodies to create his own unique sound. That sound sets him apart from other musicians and puts him on the radar of Atlantic Records, which eventually signs him to a contract. Ray's story is also a love story, which includes his relationship with his second wife, Bea. Bea stays true to Ray throughout the film, despite the singer's infidelity and drug use, both of which drive a wedge between the two. Ray Charles' move from Atlantic Records to ABC Records revitalizes his career and sets him on the path to becoming much more than just a rhythm and blues musician. He crosses over into other musical genres, including country, and becomes one of the most successful recording artists in the business. However, Charles's addiction eventually takes center stage, and the singer enters a drug rehab program, which sees him finally get the help he needs. Ray was a box office smash, making $124 million on a budget of just $40 million. The film earned Jamie Foxx an Academy Award and a Golden Globe for Best Actor. The movie was also nominated for Best Picture and Best Director and took home a Grammy for Best Soundtrack. Ray is hailed by many critics and fans alike as the best music biopic of all time. Its dramatic storytelling, along with the musical genius of Ray Charles, makes the film a classic that will surely stand the test of time. And that's the lowdown on Ray. The word icon is thrown around in the music business, sometimes a little too liberally at points. But to be fair, there have been a lot of icons in the music business and from many different genres, many different walks of life. And you got to think, kids, about how far back we're going, how far back we're going in terms of, the Grammys and recorded music in general, and pioneers and innovators and men and women who either set the bar or raised the bar for their respective fields. And you can name them off, two or three, I was going to say one hand, but maybe two or three hands, a number of maybe modern era icons. I mean, you have to say Johnny Cash would have to be an icon for his impact, not just on rock and roll, but rockabilly, country music, of course. The guy definitely had an impact, and he still has an impact to this day. And there's a lot of other musicians out there. Stevie Wonder, obviously, an icon. I mean, how do you not call Stevie Wonder an icon? And that's just two right off the bat. That's not even taken into account more modern day. I mean, is Nirvana an iconic band? You better believe they are. I mean, they didn't maybe just start a trend, but they changed trends in the music business. They set the music business on a whole new path. I mean, innovators, yes, absolutely. So yeah, there's a lot of the Beatles, obviously, and we've covered the Beatles here on the 6M before. Yes, icons, guys who stepped in and said, you know what, I've got a way I want to do this, and no one sounded like this before me, but everyone's going to sound like this after me because I'm going to be that inspirational and, again, trend setting, raising the bar, setting the bar. and making everyone that follows after you stand up and take notice. And when you're talking about icons, you got to mention Ray Charles. Ray Charles Robinson, actually. And Ray Charles with hits in different genres of music. This guy was not restricted to just rock and roll and not just soul music and not just gospel and not just country. He did a little bit of everything, and he didn't have any limits on where he could go creatively, and he didn't like limits being put on his music. He wanted to do what he wanted to do. And I think that sort of became the defining aspect of his career in the long run was like, hey, just let me play. Give me a band and just let me play. Let me do what I do. And that's who we're talking about here today. But more specifically, the film Ray. We've done Walk the Line here on the 6M and talked a lot about Cash and his career, but we focus primarily on the film. So that's what we'll essentially be doing here today on this episode of the 6M. So, Phil, from the jump here as we get started, why is Ray Charles an icon in the music business even today?
Just the type of boundaries that he broke, the barriers he broke, uh, both professionally and financially. Um, the type of deals he was able to broker through his music, um, the way he gave back. I mean, yeah, he just is one of those artists that just transcended race, just transcended genre. Um, yeah, it's hard to name another guy from that era that achieved as much as he did.
Did you grow up with Ray Charles music? Was Ray stuff being played as you were a kid growing up?
Not really. I mean, of course, I heard his music, but no, not really.
Hmm. My growing up, my mom had an eclectic mix of music. She was, I grew up in the uh, early '70s, so it was, I'm an '80s kid, I guess you could say. But my mom had vinyl, had a huge collection of vinyl. She had Queen, she had Kiss, she had Bob Seger, the Silver Bullet Band. She had Foreigner, she had AC/DC, she had the Oak Ridge Boys, which is another podcast for another day. You can't say the name Oak Ridge Boys without smiling because it's, again, a whole other topic. But and she had Ray Charles. So I grew up listening to some Ray Charles. I grew up listening to Johnny Cash, but I also grew up listening to Kiss and Queen and Foreigner and again AC/DC and Bad Company and sort of a mix of all different styles as I'm a kid. But Ray Charles just sounded cool. And much in the same way that James Brown sounded cool. It was just like, this guy's got something besides the piano, which he was a master at, obviously. This guy's got something. His tenor, his pitch, his tone, his delivery, complete confidence in his vocal ability, this guy. I mean, and very early on, the movie touches on this quite a bit. Very early on, he did a lot of Nat King Cole, and his stuff sounded like Nat Cole stuff, and it's not what they were looking for. They wanted him to be him and to deliver something different, which he eventually did. Um, Dude, it's again, his music just, I don't know, he just sounds cool. It's hard for me to put it into words, but again, just professional and just sounds like he's completely confident. Phil, what is it for you that makes him, what makes him stand out, not only from other artists of his time, but also maybe of some contemporary artists? What is it that sets him apart? Is it the voice? Is it the playing? Is it both? I mean, what is it about him to you that makes him different?
He came from an era where you kind of had to work twice as hard. You had to be excellent at your craft, and by that I meant it wasn't just that he could come in and he could sing, but he had to be an excellent piano player. It wasn't like you could just get a record deal the way that people get deals now. It's so much easier to get a record deal today than it was then. And so, because of that, I felt like, just the caliber of musicianship was different. And I think that's part of why he stands out. When you compare him to a lot of guys now, even when you compare him to a lot of music producers or people that are classically trained, like he is just stand out because he's just a, you know, excellent talent.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, and this guy started learning to play at a very young age, and we saw that being depicted in the film. And kids, you got to understand something here as we start talking about this film here today. There is, especially when you're talking about biopics, musical biopics, there's going to be the story they want you to see and the things they're willing to talk about and the things maybe they're not willing to talk about they don't want you to see. There's going to be dramatizations. They're going to be characters are going to be handled differently depending on who's telling the story. I go back to Walk the Line and how Johnny's first wife was depicted pretty horribly, that she was holding Johnny down creatively and didn't want him playing that music with the boys and wanted him to be a house husband. According to her kids, to John's kids, much later, especially about that film, that was not at all the case. That they made her out to be very much more demanding than she actually was. So yeah, a lot of this stuff, folks, is going to be dramatized. And if you wanted the actual scoop, there's books out there. I think Ray has his own autobiography you're willing to check out. You're free to check out if you'd like to. We're going to give you the cornerstones or the touchstones of this film here today and let you guys decide for yourself. Dude, as we start into this, they didn't hold back. And we just talked about, things that they're willing to talk about, things they're willing to discuss, things they're willing to reveal. They jumped into his drug use pretty early in this film. And it's something for me, and I want to get your take on this, see if you felt this way too. There were several moments in this film where Ray didn't seem like too much of a good person. It almost felt like once he got what he needed from you, if he was done, he would move on to the next person that would give him what he need. And I'm not just talking about women, but I'm talking about people in general. Like, and I don't want to say he cast him by the wayside, and I'm not trying to depict him in that light, but the way the story was told, it really did feel like, well, I'm done with this guy. This other guy talks a better game, so I'm going to go with him. And it repeated itself several times. Did you catch that upon watching this film again? I mean, how does that hit you in the story?
Yeah, there were several times where he did not come off as a good person, but I also gathered that a big part of I don't want to say his character because he's a real person, but a good part of his character arc throughout the movie is that self reliance was very important to him, and so because of that, he didn't have much use for personal relationships. Um, and so, to your point, I feel like he kind of got what he needed out of people, and then once he was done, he was ready to move on. He didn't want to get too attached to people.
Yeah, and it's again, I hadn't watched this film in a long time when I rewatched it again yesterday. But that kind of struck me was how, man, it just feels like he's using people up, whether he meant to or not. That's what it really felt like. How long had it been since you'd seen this film?
I haven't seen it in a while, probably at least like 5 or 6 years. I haven't seen it in a long time, probably longer than that. Um, but I think the other part, when you look at some of it, not just that it seemed like he used people up, it seemed like he had like real trust issues. He had like almost like a paranoia. It was like the second he felt like somebody was trying to get over him, he would completely X them out. If he felt like they were trying to use him for something, he used them first and get rid of them.
Good call. Yeah, for real. That's a great way to put it. I mean, can you imagine a blind black man growing up in Alabama in the South, and for freak's sake, in the time period he grew up in? Yeah, he's gonna. If he wasn't blind, he would have trust issues, right? I mean, that just compounds the issue right there.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. I think there were several times in the movie where um, it's such a great story because you can kind of empathize with him, but at the same time, it's like, oh, you're just also kind of a bad person as well.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say a bad person because I don't know if anybody is 100% a bad person. Um, it just the circumstances he was put in and just how he reacted to people afterwards.
And they certain words, certain terminology used in this movie. I don't think it's to the point of trying to be. It's not Django Unchained or anything, but it's like it's enough to get the point across. And it's like one of the first opening scene was with the bus driver, right, when he's telling him, he didn't want to be responsible for this blind kid, and he lies to him and tells him he left his eyes on Omaha Beach, and the driver immediately backs down. from this racist nonsense that's going on at the time, and says, "You were at Normandy," and Ray's like, "Yeah, we took a direct hit," and he shows him his eyes. And this driver suddenly becomes human for a half second, and he apologizes to him. And I'm like, that right there is for me a great way to capture the hypocrisy that was going on at the time. In that if this film captured it for me, but I think that's the first time I noticed upon rewatching it, man, they really nailed it. Like, here's this guy, and he could have said probably a lot worse, and he said bad enough, right? But the fact that he thought Ray had served during the war, he immediately apologized. Like, that meant something to him. Oh, you fighting for the country, that means something. But if you were just a regular black guy, I'd hate your guts and make fun of you and talk down to you and kick you while you're down. Dude, the hypocrisy of that time. I mean, I thought they captured it beautifully in that one scene.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I do feel like he had his way of dealing with relationships, but I think that he also was treated in a certain way where people would treat him poorly like that. But the second they saw where they could get some use out of him, then they want him around. I mean, when he went and he auditioned for that band, and the guy was just dead set, he didn't want him in Florida. And then when he saw he could play, he was like, I guess he can stick around. But he had just said all this horrible stuff about him before that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Again, he had a reason to, and it's, not to excuse anybody here, kids. I mean, if you're an adult and you're behaving a certain way, maybe you need to work on yourself, but you also got to look at the guy's background, where he came from. I mean, that does play a huge part in it, obviously. Um, let's dig into the cast. We've talked a lot about Ray, but we got to talk about Jamie Foxx, dude. How important was it? And for all we know, there's another African American actor who could have nailed this part and could have done an admirable job. But from a distance, it looks like Jamie Foxx is the perfect choice to play Ray. I mean, it's, Gary Busey, as wackadoodle as Gary Busey's been over the years, was pitch perfect as Buddy Holly. I don't know if anybody else would have worked. He was awesome. I mean, for me, Jamie Foxx is the perfect choice to play Ray. What do you think?
Yeah, I just could not imagine this movie without Jamie Foxx. Even when they show like older pictures of Ray, he looks kind of like Jamie. Um, yeah, I just think this was perfect casting, and I mean, this is probably like a career, and not probably about it. This is a career defining performance from Jamie. Like, he absolutely killed it. Like, his tone, everything. He sounds like him. His mannerisms are perfect. I mean, when he's singing, he sounds very much like him. I know that they use recordings for certain parts, but he sounds very close to him when he's actually just singing. Yeah, he's perfect.
And he got to hang out with Ray, because I think, didn't Ray pass as they were filming this movie?
Yes.
Yeah. But there's footage out there of he and Ray hanging out together, and man, sitting side by side behind the piano that's something to behold. Speaking of piano, how important is it? Like, let's say Jamie couldn't play. He's never played in his life. I'm sure he would have pulled it off. But the fact that he could physically sit down as an actor, and when they closed up on his hands, it wasn't a double's hands. It was him. How important is it that Jamie can actually play for this part?
I don't know if it's important, but it just speaks to just how talented Jamie Foxx is. Jamie Foxx is one of those guys where I feel like he should be doing so much more than he's doing in Hollywood, and he should be appreciated more. Especially watching this movie, it's kind of like, this guy is amazing, and he should be a leading man in a lot more movies. I don't know if that's just, he's not interested in that kind of thing, or if he's just not getting the roles, but watching him in this thing, I mean, you're talking about a multi-talented guy. This guy could easily be, I don't know, like a Grammy Award winner, an Oscar winner, all over the board, a Tony's winner. He could be on Broadway. He could do anything he wants to do.
I 100% agree. And honestly, I have always thought that he's doing what he wants to do. Because, like, he was so in demand after Ray. He had his probably his pick of scripts, whatever he wanted, and probably still could today. But, dude, could it be that he's doing what he wants and he's picking and choosing? I mean, I wonder what the truth is to that.
I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, it just makes me wonder if his, like you said, I mean, why has he not done more? Maybe he just hasn't. I don't know. Some guys are like about scripts. They're kind of iffy. Like not everybody's Nick Cage, right? Because right, the joke was always Cage said yes to everything. But yeah,
or Sam Jackson. Sam Jackson says a lot. He says yes a lot.
he does, right? But like Sam's stuff is usually not as horrible as Cage's stuff is, man. Like, direct to video kind of bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, like I couldn't even tell you. I'm trying to right now remember what film he followed Ray up with. If you gave me long enough, I'd think of it. It wasn't the movie with, God, who am I thinking of?
I know he was in that movie where he was the homeless guy and he could play the violin, the soloist or something like that.
Something like that. I don't know if that followed this up or not.
I don't know if that was the direct movie after that because it was him and Robert Downey Jr.
That's right. Yep. He was great in Horrible Bosses.
Yeah, he's been great in several things. I'm just trying to think what right after Ray.
Because in Horrible Bosses, he was Mother Effer Jones, and so good.
Wasn't he in? He's in that movie where he had that massive tattoo on the back of his head, and it was like he was he's not a Marine. He was in the Air Force.
That sounds familiar, but I can't place it.
Stealth. That's what it was. It was Stealth.
Dude, listen. Isn't this a byproduct of what we just said? Was that we can't remember the follow-up to Ray.
And Stealth is not a good movie.
Right.
It's not a good movie.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, is it his agent or is it him just not being interested? I don't know, dude.
I think he did like 2 Army roles right after Ray. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking about it. I know Stealth was one of them. I don't know, and I know he had he did Dreamgirls not too long after that too.
Yeah, and that's a whole other conversation right there. Let's see. So he did. So Ray is 2004. Obviously, he did Stealth and Jarhead.
Jarhead, that's what it was. Jarhead,
and then he did Miami Vice.
Oh God. Yikes.
Listen. Listen. My God in heaven. Here's how you follow Ray, okay? Stealth, Jarhead, Miami Vice, Dreamgirls, The Kingdom. The freaking Kingdom, dude. Elmo's Christmas Countdown as himself. I mean, that did it right there. The Soloist, which you mentioned. Law Abiding Citizen.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, which is him and Gerard Butler. Valentine's Day. Romantic comedy. Due Date, which is not a bad flick.
What's the movie he's in where he's a cab driver and he's driving Tom Cruise around for most of the movie, and Tom Cruise is like he's like a mercenary or a bounty hunter.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a very good movie. He plays like this nervous guy that's the cab driver for the whole movie. I cannot think of the name of it. It was around the same time though.
Let's see. Yeah,
Collateral. That's what it is.
Collateral. Did I see that? I think I saw that.
Very good movie.
Yeah. And that's crazy. But yeah, he and Collateral, yeah, you're right, it was around the same time. There you go. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Jamie Foxx. He was made to play Ray Charles. I swear he was. I think this was the role he was meant to play. And as you said, it did set off his career in ways that, probably we couldn't have anticipated. Now you've really got me thinking about this what if scenario and why he didn't, after the fact, rise to superstardom. Not that he's not a star, but now you've really got me thinking about that. Kerry Washington as B, Della B. Robinson, which is, of course, Ray's wife. She is so good in this movie, and she is strong when she needs to be strong. And and it's funny because in the beginning she's a little naive, but she's still a strong woman. And I can't imagine the level of strength that this woman had to have to go through all the nonsense that she had to go through with Ray, the actual man. I mean, it must have been, hell on earth at times for her. I mean, obviously, all the money in the world can't fix it if your husband's messed up and he's never there. But Kerry Washington as B, great in this movie, isn't she?
She is great in it. She has been in another. She was in Django. That's right. I was about to say, what else was she in with Jamie? She's in Django. Yeah, I think she's a great actress. There are big parts of this movie where we don't see her for a long time, but then she'll have another scene where it's like, oh yeah, and then she'll just like knock it out of the park. Like towards the end of the movie, she has a really really good scene where she tells Ray off, and she just does a fantastic job with it.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And it should be noted that Ray's son, I think, was an executive producer on this film. I think Ray Robinson Jr. Because I know he's in the credits for the film, so he had some definite input, as he should have in this movie. But yeah, she's great. I think one of the great selling points about this film is the strong female cast that's lined up, because there's some home runs here by pretty much all the women in this cast. I mean, I think that probably sets this apart from any other music biopics that's out there too, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like I feel like it would have been very easy to have him have like these no name actresses next to him um,
Hmm.
in these roles. There's a lot of women that were in his life, but no, they actually cast really good actress in the roles.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, you're right. They could have just cast anyone in these roles and just let Jamie sort of be the star and steal the show, but that's not what they did. Anuan Ellis, and hopefully I'm not butchering that, excuse me, was Mary Ann Fisher, which was really we see Ray's first, not first fling, because man, his first fling in the film, holy Lord, they really set out to put over the fact in the beginning that she was a handful for Ray, man. Like, there's that one scene where she's telling him to come back to bed, and he's telling her that he just has to get some water. And I mean, man, she is using and abusing him to no end. those some funny parts, man. The Blackberry Cobbler line is
uh,
it's cringe, but it's funny at the same time, because I have personally never heard that before, not put that way. So I'm like, oh my god, she was great. She was all sorts of you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
very domineering
very
and very controlling. Man,
very dominating, very sleazy. Yes.
yes, sleazy. That's the word. Um, and I think was that the character was Marlene. Am I getting the name right? That was that character, I think. I don't
Yeah,
want to
I
get her
think
name
so.
right. I think it was Marlene. If we've got the right, Denise Dowse played Marlene. Yeah, because we meet her pretty early in the film, and we also meet Terrence Howard's character. And we've talked about Terrence here on the show before as Gossie McKee, who was based, and these two together were using Ray. So from the very start of this film, Ray's being used by everybody he comes into contact with, lying to him, cheating him, stealing from him. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Everyday Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark 6M Podcast sent you. I mean, he gets a lesson pretty early on about not just the music business, but the world around him. As you said, Phil, to your point from earlier, it really does set the tone for his life moving forward, is that he can't trust anybody, even to the point of having his money counted out to him in ones so he knows that they're not cheating him.
Right. Yeah. So I cannot take Terrence Howard in this movie seriously because Jamie Foxx completely ruined it for me. I don't know if you've ever seen this interview, but there's an interview where I don't know what happened between him and Terrence Howard, but I guess Terrence Howard said something about him he didn't like. And so he spent most of this interview making fun of Terrence Howard, and it is hysterical. He said something about him, and then he goes, "Is this the guy that plays the same character in every movie?"
Wow.
he's like every movie. He's like Ray, what's going on with Ray? I don't know what's happening with him. Iron Man, what's going on with all these Iron Man?
Oh,
it's so hilarious.
I can't unsee that now. Now that you've said it, I'll see it all the time.
And of course, I'm not doing it any justice. His interpretation of of Terrence Howard's voice is spot on. Wow. It's hilarious. I assume it was just like something in jest where, you know, they probably moved on from it, but that whole interview was hilarious. But no, Terrence Howard is actually he's great. I feel like he does always kind of play like these sinister behind the scenes guys. Like he plays kind of a similar guy in what's the Mariah Carey movie? Glitter. He plays kind of similar character in that.
Yeah.
He kind of plays like a kind of shady figure guy in Dead Presidents as well. I feel like he's done this kind of role a few times. He in Big Mama's House, he was the bad guy in that, right?
I will never not see this now. You're right. It's 100% right. I'll never not now. Every time I see him do something, is it the same in the show? What's the show he's in? Empire's not it. What's it called?
Yeah, it's Empire.
Is it Empire? Yeah. Is it the same character there too?
What's going on with you, man?
Yeah, he does have that voice, doesn't
he? What's going on with this hustle and flow, man?
Oh my God, that's funny. Yeah, that ruined it for me. I'll never not see it now. Yeah, and by the way, we were right. It was Marlene. And dude, I'm doing the same thing you do. I'm saying the word character, but person. The person, Marlene Andre. That's who we're talking about. So, yeah, those two together. I mean, they did what they had to do, and she's very unlikable, as she should have been unlikable. She's not charming in the slightest. He's probably as slimy as she is. But yeah, it's perfect. It fits. Clifton Powell as Jeff.
Yeah.
When Clifton is driving that bus and he's asking Ray, how does he get around and stuff, and Ray smarts off to him, and he says, "I'm sorry, Ray, I didn't mean to pry." I thought, I like this guy. I really like this guy. And then Ray immediately calms down and backs up and says, okay, he's just curious. Dude, that dude, and I love this guy. I've seen him in other stuff before, and he's very good. He hooked me with that one line. He managed to hook me, and I was in that guy's corner for the rest of the film. He's so good in this.
Yeah, I really like Clifton Powell. He's been in a ton of things I've seen. Yeah, very good actor. But you see Ray, on his toes a lot early in the movie, and he kind of gives these very sarcastic answers a lot. I think one of his best lines early in the movie is when Terrence Howard's character was trying to explain like him, skimming off the top of his deal, and he was like, "I was gonna sit down and talk to you. I was gonna explain." And he was like, "Why aren't you explaining?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was going to talk to you about that. We'll start talking. Yeah, that's good. You're right. He was on his guard quite a bit until he had a reason not to be. Like he would trust you when he had a reason to, but then at the first sign of trouble, he turned on you. This is a guy that we didn't get to too early in the film, but Harry Lennox as Joe Adams. Harry is great in this because he just looks like trouble from the second he shows up. To me, it's not Terrence Howard kind of sliming it for that character, but it does feel like, oh, this guy looks at Ray and sees dollar signs and he's going to weasel his way in. Did you get that when you first saw him in the film?
I didn't, but Harry Lennox very seldom plays like anybody that's like a good guy. He always kind of plays somebody that's kind of cold and calculating.
Right.
And so, yeah, this guy's kind of the same thing. He came off very calculating, very, very much like he was trying to slide in and, you know, not take advantage of Ray, but, just take my man's spot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is what he did. It's what he did to Jeff later in the film, which was heartbreaking to see that. I didn't want to see that happen. Um, he was also in the Five Heartbeats, the Robert Townsend film. Don't get me started on Robert Townsend, man, because I grew up watching Hollywood Shuffle, and I
Big fan
freaking
of big fan of Hollywood Shuffle and Five Heartbeats.
yes, I loved Hollywood Shuffle. Me and a friend of mine could we could quote that movie. Every line of that film, we could quote it. There was just something about it that we just fell in love with. We watched it. I think it was on HBO at the time, and recorded it on VHS. Thank you very much. And I watched the life out of that film. So much so, I think I destroyed the tape. Didn't mean to. Yeah, loved it. Um, Great cast here. Bokeem Woodbine as Fathead Newman. If your name is Fathead, you got two choices. You're either an idiot or you're very cool. And Bokeem Woodbine, what's the old line? You could read the phone book and kill it. This dude is great. We've seen him in the MCU at least one time. I mean, I love this guy. Everything he's in, I'm there for it. Um, I love him in this film. We see that when Ray wants to get his taste of heroin, he really wants to, and Fathead tells him straight up, "I don't want anything to do with this." He leaves the room because he knows what's going to happen, and I love that about this guy. And of course, he screws up throughout the film or whatnot, and then gets in trouble later. But dude, I love this guy, and I think he just adds to an already stellar cast here.
Yeah, I mean he's fantastic. His delivery of lines is always perfect. I've seen him in so many things, and he's always very good in it. Um, yeah, I think him walking out of the bathroom, that entire scene of him. Nah, we ain't in here smoking weed. That's boy.
Yeah, right.
We
I've
ain't here
never heard it called that, but yeah.
me ever. Ever. This here is man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I love that. I love the idea that maybe I don't know if you could say he cared so much for Ray that he didn't want to see him do it, or it's just that I'm not going to be responsible for this guy if it kills him. Um, Maybe it's a little bit of both. I don't know, but yeah, I love that scene. Actually, that scene always stuck out to me when I rewatched the movie. Sharon Warren as Ray's mom, Aretha. She is all of like 90 pounds soaking wet, but she looks like she could lift a car over her head because her character is so incredibly strong. We see Ray's little baby brother die in a wash basin. And, what they always say is that, a child could drown in an inch of water in a tub. It doesn't take much. I mean, that's horrifying. And to be honest, I forgot about that and I teared up. Couldn't help it. It's a very emotional moment. And, dude, her work as Aretha, and you don't see her too awful much, but man, she keeps showing up in flashbacks. The water, we'll talk about the water here in a bit, but um, what about Sharon Warren as Ray's mom here?
Yeah, she is really good as his mother. Um, there's so many women that I can, point to probably at some point in my life that she reminds me of because um, my grandparents were from the South. I know so many people from the South. Um, and she very much is, in some ways, the spiritual backbone of this movie in a lot of ways.
Mm.
At least for his character development throughout the movie and, of course, his, eventual resolution.
Yeah, you're right. She is sort of the conscience of the whole thing. Dude, I mentioned the water. What about the moments of him sort of reliving how his brother drowned? At any point, did that take you out of the film at all? I mean, did it click with you? Was it okay? Was it a little too much in moments, or what's your take on that?
At some points, it was terrifying at some point. Like, I think the part when he was putting his clothes in his
Yes.
suitcase and he kept feeling the water and then he felt a little foot. It was scary, and you could see why, as a blind man who can't see, and then he is constantly having like this, this triggering moment for him. Um, and I think it's a very good depiction of depression because you look at this guy, he became world famous. He didn't have any worries at some point. He was making tons of money, and he was still very unhappy. And it wasn't like it showed itself in him walking around moping. It always showed itself either in those little weird flashbacks or his addiction to women and all this other stuff. And you could see why he did all these other things to cope with it instead of dealing with his depression.
Yeah, we don't when we don't deal with things, we cover it up with something else, which is what he was doing. Like you said, whether women or heroin or whatnot, because he never dealt with it.
Yeah, I think when the scene where he was outside the bathroom and he was saying it looked like a pipe burst or something, and that was kind of the first time that you saw he how desperate he was to try and have some relief and to do drugs to try to get rid of it.
Mm. Yeah, to try to cover up the pain. Um, what about, and I'm jumping all the way to the end here, and kids, we're not exactly deep diving on this film. We're, as we said from the jump, we're just covering the touchstones here and the big parts. But what about one of the final scenes where he's having this vision of her and his baby brother, and suddenly he can see again, and he's hugging them? I try not to read too little into anything because I don't know that that didn't happen for real for him in his mind. I don't know because he's going through withdrawals and all this other stuff. But um, did that take you out of it at all, or was it emotional? Did it work for you?
Um, it didn't really take me out of it because it was one of those things where I understand as a writer you
Mm.
have to resolve that part of the story, and that has been a underlying plot line for the entire movie. So you had to resolve it in some way. Um, and I just think that the acting in that part was very well done, and then the lines of it were very well done because him, having this coming to his mother moment of, I did it, I achieved everything, and she was like, no, you didn't. You're still crippled, and that
Yeah.
really got to me the first time I saw it because it was like no matter what he did, he could not get past what he felt like was his biggest failure.
Yeah, letting her down. Yeah. Not being what she thought he could be, what she expected him to be. Um, Curtis Armstrong as Ahmet Erdogan. He looks just like Ahmet, by the way. If you Google the guy, he looks just like him. And if you're a fan of Revenge of the Nerds, you know who Curtis Armstrong is. So he's done other stuff, of course, but I loved him in this. I thought he was I just loved his energy. I love what he brought to the role. And I'm like, I love the relationship that he and Ray had. Like when he first meets Ray, he's very respectful. He's really knocked out by Ray's ability. And from everything that you read about the Atlantic deal, that they always shot straight with him. They did right by him, which is why they're so floored when he decides to leave them later. But man, I think one of the driving points of this film for a majority of it is the relationship between Ray and Ahmet. And I thought Armstrong did great here.
Yeah, I feel like the stuff that they did with Ahmed was very good in terms that Ahmed always kind of stayed in his lane with him. He always kept it professional. He never really got out of, um, what their relationship was. And of course, they had a friendship, and he always, kept it, cordial. When he felt like he had the better deal, he was like, "Hey, I'm happy for you."
Yeah, I'm proud of
Um,
you.
yeah, and I mean, I felt like that is kind of, when you parallel that with all of the other relationships he had up to that point with business dealings, he always left those relationships on a sour note. That was one of the few in the movie where he ended it on amicable terms.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't leave putting a bad taste in anybody's mouth, which I really liked as well. Um, it's I was going to use the word funny, not that kind of funny, but it's so odd. Like you'll get period pieces, especially during the segregation era and all that nonsense. But depending on where the movie's taking place and depending on what you're talking about, like sports can be a different topic. Like for not for every white guy out there, kids during that time, but for some white guys during that time, they didn't care. It's like, hey, can you play? Can you contribute to the team? If you can help us win, I don't care what color you are. So some athletes were okay with it. And then like you kind of see in some of these music biopics, like, hey, can the guy play? Can he sing? Well, get him in here in the studio. Let's do this. So it feels like depending on what genre you're talking about, people are more open minded when they should just be open minded anyway. Let's be honest. But again, it's that time period. I thought they handled that pretty well in this movie without making it feel like, cheer for these white guys because they did the right thing for Ray. It didn't feel like that to me. Like Ray, he was firm with Ahmet when he wanted to be, and he still wasn't going to be taken advantage of. But this guy was just genuinely like, hey, I love your sound. I love what you bring. I want to hear you do your stuff, not mimic somebody else. So I thought they did a really good job with this film and not trying to, well, here's the white guy you should praise for being so awesome to Ray. It just felt like another chapter in Ray's life. I thought they did a really good job with that here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny because, like I said earlier, I feel like at that time you had to be on your game as a musician. And so I definitely feel like there were parts in the movie where um, there would be a black character that was a lot more critical of what Bray was doing, and that made so much sense for the time period and just what I know of other black people. And so that was always funny to me, like the part where he was recording with Ahmed for the first time, and he was like, "He's just doing Nat King Cole. Like we got Nat King Cole already." It's like, all right, dude.
Ah.
And there was another part when he first recorded Georgia and Fathead and was it Margie? Margie was in there and they were like, "This is crap." It's like this is like one of his most famous songs.
Right. Yeah, they were crapping all over. Like, what? How could we're not in this? What are we gonna do? Yeah. I didn't pick up on the engineer in the recording studio until you mentioned it. I didn't even, for me personally, I didn't connect those dots. I just looked at it like this guy's in the studio all the time. He hears acts come and go in his ear. This guy sounds like Nat Cole. We don't need another Nat Cole. But man,
He did it twice.
he
And then I
did.
feel like later in the movie, didn't he jump on him for his drug problem too? He's like, "Look at him, he's a junkie."
Yeah. He said he's got the junkie itch. Yeah. Wow. Man, I did not connect those dots, dude. That's crazy. Um, dude, I've run down the cast and we didn't even talk about Regina King. My God in heaven. How do you leave out Regina King? Good Lord. I don't know what I was thinking. Needless to say, Regina King is freaking awesome as Margie Hendricks. She is, my only regret is that we didn't see her more through the film because she's good at everything she does. Um, and when Ray finds out that Margie died of an overdose, that is, man, that for me, because I didn't know the story, I didn't know what happened to her. That came at me out of left field, like, and he's obviously upset by it. I mean, Regina King is great in this movie, dude. I mean, there's part of me that says she could even have played B. I mean, do you think she could have? I mean, how do you feel about her cast in this role? Would she have been a better B, or was she fine the way she was?
I was fine with who she played. I think that she could have played other roles, of course, because she is amazing. She's just such a good actress. Which, by the way, you know, condolences to Regina King as we're recording this, because I think her son just passed away of suicide like a
Oh,
few weeks ago or
wow.
something like that. It was like her only son. It's really sad to hear that. Um, but yeah, I she is a fantastic actress. And a lot of what I've heard about her, outside of just as being an actress and just who she is, she just seems like a good person. So yeah, condolences to her. That just stuck out to me the second you said Regina King.
Wow. That's a shame to hear. Yeah, for real. Condolences big time. Did you see, was it One Night in Miami that she directed? Is that what it's called?
I haven't seen that, but I've heard it's good.
It's good. It's dialogue heavy, and I'm fine with that. Um, for me personally, I would like to have seen a little bit more movement because a lot of it takes place in a hotel room. And again, that's fine. But the dynamics between the characters is great. I mean, whoever wrote this thing was on their game, man, because it's worth your time. It's worth watching for sure. And she directed it, and I think I don't know if she's directed anything since then, but if that's your first effort, she did fairly well, I think. Yeah, she's great in this movie. And then, of course, if you guys have seen The Watchmen, you know what she's capable of in that genre as well. And as we said, she can do just about anything she wants to do. That is the bulk of the cast for this film, kids. And this movie basically goes through Ray's whole life. We see some segregation stuff in this movie where he refuses to play in Georgia. And it's a very, and again, how do you know how things actually play out? Because you got the guy in the crowd who's telling Ray, "Look, Mr. Charles, you can't do this," and it's important, and we need somebody like you. And then he finally says, "Yeah, that's right. Get back on the bus." And he thanks the guy, and he says, "No, thank you." And who knows if it actually played out that way? It seems very dramatic, but either way, Georgia sucked. Some people would argue it maybe still sucks. I didn't say that. I'm not saying that. I got no hate for Georgia. Hey, I'm in North Carolina. I know how it is down here, but um, yeah, man, it's just the fact that it took them till 1979, and they wrapped the film up with that. 1979 to offer a formal apology to Ray Charles and to welcome him back to the state and adopt Georgia on My Mind as the state song. What about ending the film with that, dude? I mean, that was, for Ray, by all accounts, that was a very important moment for him.
Yeah, I thought it was a great way to end the movie. Because I mean, he had done other things with his career after that, but I think that was a great way to end the movie. I really liked the way that they handled the scene where he decided not to do Jim Crow shows anymore, and I like that they set it up with that conversation he had with Quincy Jones. I thought all the way they handled all that stuff was really good.
Yeah. Oh man, we talked about the cast. We did not mention Quincy Jones, portrayed by Lawrence Tate. Um, I assume they got it, but my frame of reference for Quincy Jones is not the young kid playing the trumpet. That's not Quincy Jones that I know. The Q that I know is the guy that worked with Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? So like, I'm sure they nailed it, but I'm not going to say I didn't know that they were friends at a young age, but I guess I didn't put two and two together. But the scenes that he was in, he was great. And I kind of wish he was in this movie a little bit more too.
Yeah, I thought he was great in the scenes that he was in. I thought it was hilarious that he was trying to sneak his way into that nightclub at first, and that guy was like,
Yes,
"Look, get out of here, kid." Um,
it's great.
but I mean, that just shows you kind of the genius of Quincy Jones in just those few moments of that. He's only 17. He already knew so much about music. Um, and he just there was just such a hunger to get on and to do music with other contemporaries, but he just wasn't old enough to get into the clubs where he could play with these guys. Yeah, I thought the few scenes that he was in, he was good.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I enjoyed his work here as well. Um, so we're talking about this film. We're talking about this again, as we said from the jump, an icon. What about the music itself. This is probably one of the best music soundtracks of all time. I mean, it's great. Classics on here from start to finish. Um, what about, and Phil, you know, I spoke about this before, and we also talked about here on the Walk the Line episode about the fact that a lot of guys of that time period were taking, and I don't want to say stealing because that's a big word for what we're talking about here, but heavy inspiration from other songs. Cash did it. I mean, there's you know Folsom Prison Blues was an entirely different song, sung by a woman, not about a prison but about a town, and Cash just changed the lyrics and made it about a prison, but the whole song exists there for you to listen to. And I'm like, dude, he just took the whole song. I mean, Ray just took gospel and changed the lyrics. Have a product or a service that you want to get out into the world? Always wanted to try your hand at podcasting but don't know where to start? We've got you covered. Pod for Hire is a podcast production company that offers turnkey services to fit your needs. We produce your show from start to finish, allowing you the valuable time you require to focus on your established clients as well as prospective clients. We pride ourselves on delivering a top-notch product that will set your business apart from the rest and give your company the exposure it deserves. For more information, give us a call at 1-828-800-9880 or email us at info@podforhire.com. Pod for Hire. We take the work out of podcasting. So, in your opinion, for how you view it, do people get a pass because of the time period because everyone was doing it? Does it matter to you? Is it, I mean, all right, so I'll give you an example. Lennon and McCartney, heavily influenced by the acts that they saw. Obviously, they would take their cues from different songs and they would do their own version or do their own take. There's one thing to be influenced. There's another thing to take almost the entire melody and just change the lyrics. Is it a big deal for you in the grand scheme of things, or does anybody even care about that anymore?
I this is going to be a very new agey artist answer, but I feel like everybody is inspired by someone. In terms of music, all genres of music are created as a reaction to another genre of music, and they're influenced by that. I mean, rock music is heavily influenced by the blues and other things that came before it. When you look at other types of music, it's the same thing. A big part of what rap music is sampling, and that's sampling from all types of genres. To be honest with you, growing up, I had a lot of music in my household, but I don't know if anything has done more to make me a fan of music than rap music, because there's so many things on the production side that I learned about music wise. And I was like, what is this a sample of? And then I found what it is a sample of, and then that made me discover the artist. That's how I discovered jazz music. Is I picked up something that was a jazz sample, I think from a Q-Tip song, and then I was like, oh, this is cool. And then that turned into, okay, well, what album is that on? And then that turned into me listening to the entire album. And so I feel like a lot of things are just inspired by a lot of things. That's just how artists work. I learned how to draw by reading comic books. I learned how to draw by looking at how Steve Ditko drew Spider-Man. I tell people that all the time. I wouldn't know how to draw if it wasn't for comic books. And so I just feel like that's what it is. Everybody that picked up an instrument and everybody that learned whatever it is to whether it be a singing to sing or whatever they've done in music, they learned that by listening to someone else.
I can get with that, yeah.
And so, the stealing part of it, and like you said, stealing is a big word. It's only because artists put in this commercial sense where everybody makes money off of it. Once you start making money off of it, then it turns into a theft thing, because it's like, oh, well, now you're making money off of something that I made. But I feel like if you really boil down most music, there are influences from everything. And I mean, there's original music out there, of course, but Yeah, I mean, when you really look at it, everything is inspired by something.
Yeah, you're right. And the stuff that you would call original is either so avant-garde that it's a majority of people couldn't listen to it because it's so out there, or maybe that itself is taken from something as well. You're right.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like if he was just going out there and lip syncing and he didn't have the
Right.
ability. No, the guy had the ability. The guy knew a lot about music. We're talking about a guy that was classically trained to play
Mm,
piano. The conversation that he had with Quincy when they're outside of that nightclub is because Quincy is playing, I think, a Dizzy Gillespie song, right?
I think so. Yeah.
And he was asking him, he was like, "Yeah, of course I know what that is." And he was like, "What is the song backwards?" He was like, "No Name." And he's like, it's just certain references in a movie like that. It's
Right.
like this guy knows music. Like he wouldn't have been able to do certain things that he did, even though they were interpolations of other people's music, if he wasn't that brilliant.
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Yeah. I just and do they talk about this in the movie as well? And I got to get your take on this part of it too, because depending on where you come from, not like neighborhood wise, but I'm talking about in terms of whether you have faith or not, or what your faith is in, I guess. Different people have different, opinions on taking gospel. And, I don't know that it's as big a deal now, but at the time, he caught flack so much for this that he was probably the first guy to take cues from gospel music. And that's what he wanted to do. And he made a career of it. And no one else was doing it. And the guy did it. And like you said, he was excellent, excellent musician, one of the best. And, but yeah, he did it. Where do you come in on this? Is it a big thing for you? Can you see why people get upset over it, or what's your take on it?
It doesn't bother me at all. I think some people are very big into religious music and it's being served used for its own for simply that purpose of being used for spiritual purposes, and then secular music needs to stay where it is. I personally don't believe in any of that. I feel like music is music. um, like I feel like the same way I said that a lot of people are inspired by music, gospel is a genre of music. Some people might not see it as just that. They might see it as, it's part of the worship, but it's a genre of music. And so, some people, when they bend genres, like you see it a lot with you see it a lot now, people bending genres.
Mm.
You see it with Chance the Rapper is a good example. Chance uses a lot of gospel in his music now with rap. And it's good music. I mean, long as it's good music, that's all I really care about.
Yeah, I feel you. I remember Blackstreet, and for whatever odd reason, that group didn't stay together. I'll never know. But No Diggity is a gospel song. Like, you take the slow rhythm out of it and speed it up. That's a singing in church gospel song.
Yeah,
So
it's Grandma's Hands, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right. Uh, but yeah, I had to get your take on that, man, because I mean, I use the word uproar. I don't know what it was because I wasn't alive in the 50s, neither were you, right? So we don't know what the actual uproar was, but it was a big thing for a long time. And my comeback to that personally is like, yeah, but these songs weren't exactly written by God to be performed in a church. Some dude wrote them. So, like, this other dude's going to write his own thing. So, what's it matter if I don't know. People just want to get upset over the weirdest stuff. I, I grew up in church as a kid. Haven't been in years, but I grew up as, that's the truth. In the mid 90s or so, I'm at this revival, Southern Baptist over here, okay? Just saying. At this revival, and this dude, this young pastor's in the pulpit, and he's doing his thing, and it's a fire and brimstone kind of day, right? And he's preaching against music, and he mentions the Doors. Dude, this is circa 1994, okay? And he mentions the Doors. Band's 30 years old at this point, maybe not quite 30. I'm like, this all you got? This you can think of as and he mentions the song "Light My Fire." I don't know why this sticks out to me, dude. And audio cassette tapes here, Phil, for me back in the day. In my tape deck in my truck, was The Doors' greatest hits, and I was listening to Light My Fire on the way to church that Sunday morning. And I'm thinking, we're really going to talk about this? We're going to talk about how the Doors are going to send us all to hell in 1994, for God's sake. Yeah, I think the uproar over some of this stuff is a bit ridiculous. I mean, what other choice did Ray have but to do something that no one else had done before? Would he have blended in too much had he not chosen to go down this road, you think?
I mean, well, I think a lot of stuff with him developing his sound was interesting. With him saying, I think it was B that was saying, they want to hear Ray Charles, and he was saying like, who is that? And then
Right.
she was like, if you don't know, then no one else will. And so I think a big part of him developing his sound is, being true to who he was and where he came from. And he was a guy that came from, you know, a southern background that had gospel and country and all these other things as a part of his life growing up. So it would have been weird for him to just, not make
Mhm.
any music that tied back to that.
Yeah, and I think Ray's point the whole time was, look, I'm not a gospel singer. I never said I was a gospel singer, but like you said, he grew up around it. Why can't he just use it? Um, Dude, what about the fact that he, as we've said, crossed genres? And again, Phil, we're talking about as the movie progresses, America is progressing. Thank goodness we're getting out of the segregation era and all that stuff. And again, the moment where he gets welcomed back to Georgia's in '79, and of course he lived for a long time after that, up until 2004. Um, but what about the idea that this guy could transcend different genres of music and be embraced by audiences of all colors, no matter what he was singing? I mean, that's got to be. I mean, you could point to Elvis and say the same thing happened, that in his own way, because audiences of all colors loved him, of all walks of life and all faiths loved him. I mean, the same is true for Ray, but Ray's road was much harder for many different reasons. But man, worldwide embraced for what he gave the music industry. Man, if that's not inspiring, I don't know what is. What about the fact that he did cross over genres and again was embraced by audiences from every walk of life?
I think it just spoke to just how great he was. And I think that, America has really preached this story of, the American dream of somebody that came from nothing and didn't, rest on their laurels or didn't, want anybody to feel sorry for themselves, just, pick themselves up and, became, a massive success. And if anybody could say that, it's Ray Charles. He's a guy that came from poverty, that was blind, and he grew into one of the most successful musicians in the country, in the world, really.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why for some people it's easy to connect with him. He has a really great story. But again, of course, if it's just a story and he's not a phenomenal musician, then it kind of falls apart. The guy is just a phenomenal musician.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. This story could have had a much different ending and could have went horribly wrong at any given point. I mean, he could have overdosed.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's amazing what he came back from. So we're talking about the music here, right? And as far as his hits goes, like, what song to you stands out? Is there a song that stands out as like, man, I can't imagine Ray Charles without this song? Or are there just too many to mention, perhaps?
There's probably too many to mention. The funny thing is, when I was growing up, the first thing I knew Ray Charles from was the Pepsi commercials. Was the you got the right one, baby. Uh
That's
huh.
right. That's
Uh
right.
huh. So that's what I knew Ray Charles from growing up because that commercial was everywhere. And of course, I heard all of the other music later. Of course, like Cosby Show put me on
Right.
to the certain Ray Charles songs, and there's his songs would show up in other places. Um, but man, you're talking about a guy that has so many hits that have just stood the test of time, that have either remained in all types of movies and TV shows or commercials. Um, yeah, I'm sure his estate is taken very well care of.
Oh, I hope so, and I hope his family's not. Man, it's sidebar here, but Prince's estate has been in a shambles since his death because he didn't have a will, and it was a nightmare when everything happened. Prince thought he was going to live forever. I think he thought that from the jump, and so as a result of that, his family have been fighting over everything basically since he passed. I would hope that there's peace in the Ray Charles family because man, his heirs should live well based on the work that he did. Because yeah, you're right, man. It still endures and stands the test of time. Um, for me, as I said, I grew up listening to his music thanks to my mom, but I knew him from his face in the Blues Brothers film. That's kind of how I gravitated toward him because he's great now. He's basically just playing himself in that movie as a pawn shop owner, uh, a blind pawn shop owner that knows he's getting ripped off. But yeah, man, he just like you said, his story is so good and it's so relatable because he absolutely came from nothing. I mean, from the mud this guy came from to make something of not only make something of himself, but become one of the biggest musical acts in in American history. I mean, you had to say he's. I mean, again, the stuff he accomplished is just mind blowing to me. Traveled the world, saw everything, did everything. I mean, the stuff in the film, his personal relationships, the drug use, and all that. I mean, they didn't run from it. Kudos to them for not running from it. I mean, Ray had a hand in this. He knew what the story was. If there was anything he didn't want in here, that I'm sure they, I don't know, I can't say I'm sure they would have left it out, but it looks like from a distance, he didn't run from anything. So he was up to the end. He's like, no, put it in there. Let's tell the world. I mean, that takes some guts right there to put yourself on display. Not just you, but people who were in your circle. Um, that's got to be a little scary too, because it's almost like a dirty laundry time just to tell your story. But they really went for the throat in it. Um, the performances in this film, the music, everything in between. I really love this movie, man, and I just forgotten how much I love it. And I think Jamie Foxx makes it for me. The music is fantastic, as we said before. Um, but yeah, Ray just stands out as one of the best of all time. What what do you think about this film in terms of the biopic? I mean, is it the best one of all time in your opinion? What do you think?
I think it has to be among the best. I think for a lot of biopics for musicians, it kind of lives and dies with the performances, and the performances in this movie are so good. Um, like I mean, there's so many. I mean, opening up the movie with him playing, you know, and having that that great shot of him, you can see him playing through his sunglasses. It's just so good. The stuff like him improvising um, in the middle of performances, him mimicking Nat King Cole and all these other artists at the beginning of the movie. Um, I think one of the best recording scenes is when he kicks when he kicks the raylets out, and then he proceeds to record all of the harmonies himself.
Oh man.
Just genius. I mean, there were other scenes where you could see that he was doing stuff like playing the drums and doing some of the other stuff in the recordings. But yeah, I think it captured a lot of what made him such a amazing musician.
Yeah, I mean, just a genius in the studio. Knew what it's like, much like James Brown. Knew what he wanted, could hear it in his head, and made it happen. Executed it. Had to have the right people to execute it. But in like you said in Ray's case, if the people weren't executing, he just did it himself. That's insane. Um, what about the Raylets? And the joke is in the film of if we're the Raylets, does that mean we have to let Ray? That was a thing. That was a thing that was said for real. Like, um, and how Ray would feel a girl's arm to see if she was pretty or not. That's kind of how he figured it out. Ray was a ladies' man, dude. Like I don't. I mean, obviously it's on display through the film, but he's on the road all the time, and for the most part, B I'm sure knows what's going on, but like he doesn't really come out and say it. He doesn't really have to, but she knows. She knows a lot more than he thinks she knows. I mean, it's almost like every rocker biopic has to go there. They didn't walk the line. They've done it in many more, obviously, but they have to go there and tell you, hey, this guy did all kinds of cheating and he wasn't great and there's some drugs and stuff. It almost feels like a formula. Not that it has to be done, but a formula that happens anyway because of the kind of lives these guys live, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, it didn't really feel that formulaic in this movie, and I think it's because it was handled so well in relationship to his depression and other things. Um,
Yeah.
and it's so wild that I've seen this movie a lot of times, and I didn't really get, of course, till I got older and watched it, that like this guy is dealing with like severe depression. um, yeah, so I think that it reads better that way. Like, I mean, even in the scene where B discovers his drug habit, and she's like, "You've got to stop this," and it didn't feel like it didn't feel like a scene where you're just telling somebody that doesn't know they're an addict to get off drugs. It felt like this was somebody that felt like he desperately needed this because everything else in his life felt so bleak.
Hmm. Yeah, when he's holding that his kid's trophy, man, that's a powerful moment, dude.
Yeah, and I mean, man, they do such a good job in this movie of doing very subtle things with his depression. There's a scene where he's sitting there and they're singing "Happy Birthday," and he has this look on his face, and he just kind of goes, "Did he blow out the candles?"
Right.
Or when his first kid was born, and he was like, he has all his feet, and he had to like struggle through it. Like, can he see?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because he's worried about it. I mean, and then there's that moment where he's being told by the record executive on the phone. He's telling him that he's went number one, and he's so drugged up that he's barely talking, like he's just murmuring. Like there's man, yeah. Jamie Foxx, yes, absolutely, winning the Oscar for best actor in a leading role. It won a lot of other stuff too. I mean, it got also best Grammy for best album, best compilation soundtrack album for motion picture, best score soundtrack album for motion picture, television, or other visual media, Image Awards, Golden Globes. I mean, yeah, there's a big long list of awards. It was nominated for best picture, which it didn't win, best director, best costume design, best film editing. Um, but yeah, yeah, as we said earlier, man, this is what put him on the map for sure. Um, it's an enjoyable film, and I like the way you put it earlier. Is that this film had a point it had to make. It had to come full circle and sort of take care of what the issue was. And the issue was that he was, he had to come full circle in his life, and it all ended with the Georgia stuff in 1979, and him coming to grips with who he is and getting clean and everything. And I love the scene in the rehab when the doctor's telling him, "You're not the first celebrity addict, that's tried to lie to me and try to get one over on me. It's not going to work." I love that guy so much because he's like, "I'm not going to be intimidated by Ray Charles. That's not going to happen. Like, I don't care how famous or how rich you are. My job is to get you clean." I thought that was great, dude.
Yeah, and I mean, man, again, to just to just go into just how great Jamie is in this movie. He doesn't just do all of the music stuff well. He doesn't just do a perfect impersonation of Ray Charles. He also does all of the scenes in rehab very well. None of it feels very hokey or none of it feels unbelievable. He does fantastic when he's in bed and he has the shivers and he's doing all that stuff. It all looks great.
God, the way it's shot is great too.
Yeah, and I mean, man, this guy had to pretend that he saw water on the ground several times in this movie and be afraid and make it believable.
Yeah.
Man, I just cannot say enough just how great Jamie was in this movie. He was just incredible.
Yeah, great stuff. And as we said before, he got the mannerisms down. Um, There's footage out there of him and Ray together. It's really good stuff. His voice, his cadence, he nailed that. So much stuff he did well here. It's really good stuff. Jamie's best role, obviously. I mean, is this going to be the film that he's always going to be remembered for, you think?
I think it'll be this. I there's other things that he's done, but I feel like for sure this is a career defining performance.
Yeah. Well, as we said, kids, this isn't a deep dive. We wanted to get to as much stuff as about on this film as we possibly could, and I think we've covered the majority of this. Uh, are his are any of his kids doing music? Because I'm wanting to say that the son he had with Marjorie. I don't want to say this wrong. Has he passed away? Maybe.
I know that he had a daughter that did music, and I think that she died of breast cancer
Oh wow.
or something like that. I think it was breast cancer.
There's Ray Charles Robinson Jr. Charles Wayne Hendricks was who he had with Marjorie. Sheila Ray Charles. Um, yeah, so I guess that's the three. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he's got like
There's
10 kids. He got like.
there's 12.
There you go. He's
Woo!
got a lot
12.
of kids.
Remember the DMX podcast? This kind of feel like the X podcast now, man. 12 children with 10 different women. I think that was X. I think those numbers are close. That's crazy. Yeah, Ray was ladies' man. I think we can all agree on that one. Yeah, that's a lot of kids, man. And at the end of the day, that's a lot of places to spread the money out. But that's how it works, man. I mean, it's again, his heirs. I would love to know the situation on that. Hopefully, everything's amicable. You'd hate to think about people fighting over money, dude.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I thought I read somewhere that he put all of his kids in a trust so that they were all paid
Oh,
out after he passed.
excellent. There you go. Well, yeah, I had no idea. To be honest, I had no idea he had that many kids. That's insane. Um, yeah, I mean this guy. Um, Apart from the film, we'll have to talk about that here. I mean, this guy is um, American Academy of Achievement, Georgia Music Hall of Fame, Hollywood Walk of Fame. One of the first inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was in 1986. He had Kennedy Center honors. He won 17 Grammys, was nominated 37 times. He won the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in '87. Very cool that happened during his lifetime, by the way. When stuff's done posthumously, it's still cool, but it's not as cool as when the guy can see it in front of him. Rhythm and Blues Foundation induction in 1991. I mean, this guy is, what more can you say about him, man? Let's see. Even the Ray Charles Performing Arts Center and Music Academic Building. Yeah, there you go. So, and by the way, Phil, he was posthumously inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2021. Why did it take so long? I think I know why.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not much of a country fan, so I can't speak for why they would have done that.
Oh, let me just tell you right now, I have no desire. I have no desire because I am never a country fan. Not yesterday, not today, not tomorrow. It's not my stuff. But yeah, I got a pretty good idea why I wasn't in it. But hey, that's just one guy's opinion. Yeah, man. And also we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the Ray Charles Foundation, founded in '86. The mission statement of financially supporting institutions and organizations in the research of hearing disorders, which is originally known as the Robinson Foundation for Hearing Disorders. It was renamed in '06. Has provided financial dollars to numerous institutions involved in hearing loss research and education. So there you go. Yeah, this guy did it all, man. So getting back to the film, what's your best part of the film? What's the moment that always gets you? What's the moment that always hooks you, that always makes you say, man, this movie is freaking great? Is there a scene in particular that you love?
There's probably more than one. Um, there's stuff like him playing "I Got a Woman" for the first time,
Hmm.
him playing "Mess Around" for the first time. Um, yeah, there's a lot. I mean, phew, I think him improving at the end of that show when he had 20 minutes left and just randomly just made like one of his most well known records out of it.
Yes, what I
um,
say? Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a great scene as well. Um, Yeah, I mean, of course, like the resolution with his mother and and George, I think is probably one of the best scenes movie wise.
Hmm.
Um, that's probably I mean, that's probably the best scene in the movie in terms of what it meant for the story itself. But just just on levels of geeking out on just how great of a musician he was, like
Oh yeah.
the performances I just named, or I'm sure I'm missing something. There's so many good moments in this movie. It's just a really, really good movie.
Yeah. I mean, he had the respect of his peers, not just fans of all ages and all colors and everything, but he had the respect of his peers, which is, for a musician, there's nothing quite like it. For athletes, the same way. Just the respect of your peers is a very big thing, and he had it. I mean, by the truckload, still does. I mean, the guy was phenomenal. Um, but yeah, man, this film, I'm with you. It's and plus, it was only '04, so I'm going to make this statement. It might sound weird. This film holds up. I think it'll hold up 20 years from now. Like, I don't see, for me, there's nothing in this that feels dated. It doesn't feel hokey. It doesn't feel simplistic. It just feels like they're telling a really good story here.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that. I actually feel like some of the ways that they handle depression in this movie is kind of before its time.
Mm, yeah, good call. Good call. Well, kids, that's about going to do it for Ray here. Needless to say, if you've not seen this movie, you're doing life wrong. You got to go check this out. If you don't want to rent it or pay for it, if you have the Peacock service, it's available there at the time we record this. Now, who knows what could change at any given time, but there's some background for you if you want to check it out. Uh, Phil, let's take this thing home, my friend. Give me your last word on Ray.
Probably easily go down as one of the best biopics of all time. Um, as we said, an all-time great performance from Jamie Foxx. And I mean, if you didn't have any idea of just how great Ray Charles is, I feel like this movie does a lot of justice. And if you're not a fan of his music, this definitely is something that will get you to go and discover his music.
Yeah, absolutely. As we kick this show off by calling him an icon, he definitely is. He's got a little something for everybody. If you like jazz piano, you'll love him. If you like more of a rock and roll kind of vibe, you'll love him. If you like more soul, you'll love him. If you like ballads, if you like country, if you like gospel, good Lord. I mean, he's done everything. So yeah, there's a little bit of something here for everybody. Jamie Foxx, role of a lifetime. And listen, kids, for all we know, he'll top it. Who knows? The guy's not dead, for God's sake. I'm sure he's got a lot left in him. We'll see what the future holds. But yeah, as Phil said, this movie is a definite must watch. If you haven't seen it in a while, go back and check it out again. It's definitely worth your time because, as we said, it definitely holds up. And yeah, in terms of music, in terms of what he contributed, in terms of the struggles he came through and the time period he came through and came out and emerged of it a better man for having gone through it. Dude, that's Ray Charles for sure. Not a saint, but none of us are. And again, he weathered the storm and came through it much better than he was when he went in it. So yeah, got to check this film out, folks. It's a great one. And that is Ray. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.